Hi guys, welcome to Casper on BI. Today we're going to do things a little bit different. We're going to do a deep dive. We're going to do a deep dive on Power BI security. What I've done here is I've created this session for the SQL Bits conference, but I'm also going to make it available on the Casper on BI channel. If you want to see more content, hit the subscribe button below. If you like the content that we've created today, hit the like button. For questions, please use the comments. And with that, let's get into it. Power BI security means a lot of different things. But instead of where we usually talk about things like row-level security and securing individual reports and dashboards, we are going to talk about actual securing the Power BI service. How does Microsoft secure the Power BI service? How do credentials work? How is your data being secured? And finally, we're going to take a look at some compliance and market availability. And then finally, we're going to take a quick look at how you can secure your content. So the biggest thing that we really want to talk about quickly here today is that what we see a lot is there's two adoption models within enterprises. We see self-service BI, bottoms up, business-led, agility of distribution, so really no IT is going to be there. And there's centralized IT, so it stops down where the CTO decides, okay, what I want is I want to be able to roll out Power BI to my whole organization. It is IT and hybrid led, and it's governable, and it needs to be governable and secure. It needs to be made governable and secure. Fortunately, Power BI is secure from the start. It can be made more secure when your IT team starts to get involved. And we'll talk more about that, what it means and what are the things, some of the things you can do. Interestingly enough, the majority of the features that I'm going to talk about are not features of Power BI per se. They are features of other Microsoft services that work together with Power BI. So Power BI is evolving, right? We've seen Power BI's growth. All of us have seen it, but by its growth, it also means that there are new business needs, especially when enterprise BI gets involved. So we see organic growth in Power BI organizations, large number of artifacts, hundreds and thousands, and more, much more have created in each organization. The apps are more advanced. Managing advanced enterprise applications, which leverage, managing those enterprise applications, it's quite of a struggle. And it needs to be an enterprise-grade platform, which meaning I need oversight, I need governance, I need my security team to be involved, I need my finance team to be involved. I need everyone who has a say on it to be involved and make sure that they are comfortable with people using the data inside of Power BI. And finally, they want to protect the data as well, right? You want to make sure that you can know who's uploading, downloading data from Power BI while you're still empowering self-service BI. And that's important. So Power BI helps you protect your data. So it allows you to protect data within Power BI. So you can set access restrictions, row-level security, encrypting data at rest. More about this later. Monitoring and protecting user activity on sensitive data in real time. Real-time sessions, monitoring and risk remediation, leveraging Microsoft Cloud App Security. I'll show you much more about this later on. And also allowing you to protect data outside of Power BI. So when you classify and label sensitive data, leveraging taxonomy and policies used in Office 365, like in apps like Excel and PowerPoint and Outlook, it will automatically be able to leverage those things in Power BI as well. Finally, there's admin oversight. So with audit logs, usage metrics, admin APIs, also allowing you to give admin oversight over sensitive data, inventory, and consumption. And then also protecting reporting in Power BI and security. So seeing what is happening in your organization. And again, I'll show you more about this later on. All right, so let's start by talking about user identity. So the user identity system of Power BI is not built by Power BI itself. We didn't go ahead and build our own system. It is part of the larger Microsoft Cloud. So we build our servers, just like everyone else can, on top of Azure. So the security system is built on Azure Active Directory. So if you already have something running inside of Azure and you're using Azure Active Directory, like Office 365 or Dynamics or anything, yeah, we use exactly the same infrastructure. So that AAD infrastructure will be able to secure to all of your Microsoft resources with a common set of users and groups. So again, you do it once and maybe you want to connect from Power BI to a SQL Server database that you have sitting inside of your Azure environment. Same users will be able to connect to each one of them, and without any problems they can connect because you've just given them access already in one place. It's the same users and the same credentials. And even very interestingly, if you also have your on-premise environment set up with AD, so your laptops and your computers, and people log into those credentials, and you sync them all up and you're using AD Connect, then automatically they don't have to retype passwords, they don't have to do anything. You just sign into your environment and it just works everywhere. On your mobile device, on the web browsers, on your laptops, on your desktops, all the same credentials. And if you decide to leave the company today, it's okay. Your data is being secured because they turn off the AD account and immediately you cannot log into anywhere anymore. Automatically, every user can sign up for a free Power BI license. So when they sign into Power BI, they automatically get assigned a Power BI license. This can be controlled by our IT department. So it can be turned off. So how does the authentication work? What is the flow? Most of what I'm showing you here today comes from the Power BI security white paper. So if you want, especially the first part, if you want to know everything about what's going on, I'll show you the highlights now. But if you want to know everything that's going on here, you go and download the Power BI security white paper. I have links a little bit later on, but just search for Power BI security white paper and you will be able to get to all the details here. Okay, so someone goes and logs into the browser, goes to app.powerbi.com. The app.powerbi.com goes to the Azure Traffic Manager. The Azure Traffic Manager goes back to the browser saying, okay, where do I need to go? It sends you because it's based on region. So let's say, because like for example, I work at Microsoft, we have a big tenant of Power BI. The tenant of Power BI is set up in the US, but I live in Europe, I live in the Netherlands. So when I go to app.powerbi.com, it's automatically sending me to a web frontend that is closest to me. That's a web frontend that is sitting in Amsterdam. That is going to trigger a login. Because as of now, I still don't know who I am, right? I am Casper and I live in the Netherlands, but we don't know which organization I belong to. So the Microsoft login is going to open up AAD and I'm going to log in with my credentials, or maybe I'm already logged into my browser, so it automatically all happens quickly under the covers. That is going to take a look. Okay, so you're Casper, you work at Microsoft, where is your tenant? It's going to look up where your tenant is. It's going to revert this back to the browser. The browser is going to load all kinds of resources that are not particular to you or your organization. So these are things like JavaScript files and images and things like this that are the same for everyone and does not contain any data. That is being loaded closest from you. Now, finally, when the reports start to load, that is when we go to the backend service. And the backend service is in the tenant that you've set up Power BI. We'll talk a little bit more about some optimizations process that you can do here for your organization a little bit later on. But in general, it's going to send you to the backend service. So then you've logged in and we know who you are. Okay. Now, what are some of the things that you can do that you might not know with these credentials? Well, the first thing that you can do, of course, is turn on multi-factor authentication. And again, you can turn this on for all your assets inside of Azure Active Directory. So you enable this through the admin portal. It does require Office 365 or AAD Premium. So if you just have Power BI, you need to get AAD Premium to be able to turn on multi-factor authentication. when you turn it on, it can be enabled in Azure AD or in on-premises. So you can do all kinds of things like phone calls, text, Azure Authenticator app, or when you have an on-premise IDP, it's anything that your IDP supports. Okay, so multi-factor authentication already, again, not a feature of Power BI. It is a feature of AAD. Okay, external users. Interestingly enough, that is also possible. So again, not really a feature of Power BI, it's a feature of Azure Active Directory. So external users can be invited to Power BI through AAD Business B2B. It works for both personal and work accounts. This again can be controlled as an admin feature. I can imagine in some organizations you'd want to make tight control over who can be shared to what. This can be fully controlled as an admin feature. I'll actually show you this a little bit later on. It uses a remote account. So let's say I would share something someone would share something with me to Casper@Microsoft.com. When I get that report, I actually log in with my Microsoft credentials, but I see the report from a different environment, a different tenant. It uses my credentials. It uses all the ADA rules that have been set up. But let's say someone has shared a report with me and I leave Microsoft tomorrow. Immediately when that account is being turned off at Microsoft, I will not be able to look at that model or that report anymore. It's turned off. So that's pretty amazing. Now, there's lots and lots of different things that you can set policies to control these invites. So you can turn off invitations by end users. You can have only admins and users in the guest inviter role can invite. So there's lots of policies that you can set. There's a link on the bottom that really describes a lot of the options and things that you can set. You can do some features in Power BI, but a lot of it is controlled in Active Directory itself. All right. The other thing that is possible is by working together with Intune, you have some control on your mobile device and app management. Like for example, you might want to, you're okay in your organization for your users to bring their own devices. Let's say they would install Power BI on that device, and now they have sensitive or corporate data sitting on their iPad, which also goes to the kids with play dates. You don't want that, or you want to make sure that they enforce some additional things before they can actually do it. So you can do things in here that says, okay, so whenever you want to log into Power BI in your device, you have to set up a PIN. So for example, the kids just cannot log in anymore. You can do some max field attempts. So when you have too many field attempts, it automatically wipes the Power BI from the device. So you can configure Intune, you can specify the app, so in this case Power BI, configure the policies, enable for deployment, and then you can do the end users that can install it from a company portal app. So there's lots of documentation on this too. But again, Power BI works together with all these tools and you can define it additionally. And for example, you can set up policies too that says when the user leaves my organization, wipe clear the whole thing. Like I want to wipe clear all the apps that they have installed and all of these things. So they will not be able to get to it anymore. And even the data gets removed from the machine. So again, not really a feature of Power BI, but a feature of a service that is also part of the Microsoft ecosystem. Now, my favorite feature of all is something that many people haven't heard of because they are not really into identity management and things like this. But a feature called Conditional Access for web and mobile is available through Azure AD. So you can control which IP regions can connect to Power BI. So maybe you just want to be able to have people connect when they're actually physically in the building, although these days that is probably not the way it works anymore, but you only want to connect them when they're connected through VPN. Okay, you can control that. Which devices can connect? So I don't want my people to install it and bring their own device. I only wanted to have them on corporate devices. You can control that. Which users can connect? So maybe I want to do two-factor authentication. Like for example, at Microsoft, we don't have to do two-factor authentication when we're connected to VPN. That is already considered a two-factor authentication because I was able to connect to VPN. I have logged in, so it is already two factors. So I don't have to, when I open the browser or things like this, have to go and look at my phone and things like this. Now, interestingly here, what we can do is we can make combinations too. So you can say, okay, so when you are, for example, admins can always log in because maybe there is a big problem and it needs to log in and maybe you cannot connect to CorpNets and all of these things. So there may be a few accounts that you want to be able to make sure that they can do anything. But you can say the majority of the users can only connect when they're on CorpNet. Maybe you don't want any users to connect from a different group to Power BI at all. So you can just block them off there. You don't have to do anything else inside of Power BI. So there's lots of different combinations possible here. Then on top of that, there's lots of admin controls too. So administrators, they can control sign up. They can say whether users can self-sign up to Power BI, add them manually. This is shared with Office 365. So once you turn it off, they will be able to not log in or not self-sign up to Office 365 and Power BI either. Now, there's a lot of fine-grained admin controls. I won't go through all of them here, but there's controls who can share the data, who can export data, who can create content packs, and there's just many more to come. So let me quickly show you, because probably the majority of you don't have access to the portal and the admin portals. So let's go ahead and go into my portal. The first thing that I want to show you is AAD. And here in AAD, what I can show you is, I wanted to show you quickly the security. And what I want to show you here is conditional access. And what I will be able to do here is I can look at some of the policies. 17 minutes. And now I can create new policies here. I can do all kinds of things. I can do named locations. I can create terms of use, which is also very interesting. So a lot of people are interested in this. For example, what I can do here is I can create a terms of use that would tell people, okay, well, if you sign up to Power BI, you're signing up to all these different rights. So this means that like, for example, if you log into Power BI, you say, okay, you're going to work with data. It is your responsibility to make sure that this data is handled correctly. People can sign to these terms of use and before they can actually start using Power BI. So that's pretty powerful. So we can do that, terms of use. The other interesting thing is I can go in here and create some new policies. Like I want to create a policy and I can select certain groups and I can select apps. So I'm going to select an app. I'm going to go for Power BI. Power BI. Select. And now I can start creating some conditions. Like which platform, from which locations, which client apps, which user risks, which sign-in risks. And then you can control the access too. So I can say in here, okay, well, I only want them to be configure. I selected the platforms that can log into. So I can say, okay, I don't want them to log in from Mac or Android devices. And so on. So there's lots of combinations that you can make. So I can select when they log into Power BI, which particular group of users, and then you can set the conditions. And then you can start controlling access controls too. So there's lots of conditional accesses that you can define. The other thing that I quickly want to show you here too, which is pretty cool, is when I go to my security, yeah, when I go in here, actually go back. When I go to my company branding, you've probably seen this once, right? Many people don't know it. It's not really related to Power BI, but when you log in to Azure Active Directory, you get your own corporate branding. Instead of the default Microsoft tenant, you can put your own picture and your own label and all of these things in here. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So that's one. The other thing that I quickly wanted to show you as well is our admin portal. So when I go to my admin portal, and usually most people like us, we don't have, like for example, I don't have access to this either. Like if I go to my Microsoft tenant, I don't have access to this because I'm not the admin. But there's so many options in here. Let me go back to this in a second. But okay, yeah, so I can do get help, which is a very important feature already. Not necessarily related to security, but what you can do here is you can configure it as such that when your users click on help in Power BI, they actually get sent to your team, to an BI team or a portal or a SharePoint list or a team site where they can start asking questions. This one is also very interesting, is you can actually get email notifications when there are service outages or incidents in your region. You can set up, and a mail security group will be able to receive start receiving those emails. Who can create workspaces? Who can create data sets or use data sets? Apply sensitivity labels. We'll talk more about this in a bit, but this is important because when you have sensitivity labels, and I'll show you this a bit later on, you're actually able to leverage the sensitivity label options that are set inside of Office, and you can start managing it inside of your Power BI too. And I'll show you this a little bit later on. But once you turn that on, they configure and use the same sensitivity labels from Office 365. So you can use guest user access. We talked about this before. Inviting external users, guest users publish to web, you can turn off, exporting data, certifications, email subscriptions, featured content, sharing to teams, and so on and so on. Probably the one that is very interesting here too is Power BI visuals. So what you can do here is you can turn off custom visuals completely. So that way no one will be able to use custom visuals in your organization. But maybe you've paid some users or someone, some partner and consultant to build some custom visuals particular to your organization. You can actually go ahead and use certified visuals, or you can say certified visuals only, and you can block uncertified. So that's pretty powerful too. And the other thing that you can do, and I'll show you this in a second, but you can also create organizational visuals. R in Python auditing, which is also a big thing, right? Auditing, create auditing logs for internal activity and auditing and compliance. That means that all the logs are going to be available to you in your Office 365 auditing environment. One of the items on the roadmap is, if you go to powerbi.com/roadmap, you'll see all the roadmap items. And one of the items on the roadmap is that we're going to allow you to send all the auditing logs to a log analytics environment. So then you can start doing logs or visit things directly from there. Per user data, embedding content in apps, do data flows, Q&A, and so forth. So let's quickly go to some of these items. Like for example, usage metrics and audit logs. So usage metrics is going to show me the metrics directly inside of Power BI itself. So it's going to load and it's going to show me what is going on a high level. Users, when I want to manage users, it goes to the Office 365 admin portal. Again, we don't manage any users directly inside of Power BI. It all goes to Office 365. If you don't have an Office 365 license, you still get access to this. Auditing logs, and again, it goes to the admin center. So let me quickly show you. So here, when I click on this, it opens up my auditing log environment. And here you can start seeing all the auditing events that happen. So we've exported, we've viewed, some users logged in, who has viewed, and I mean, there are so many different login fails, we updated devices, so there's so many things that you can start logging and looking into. And it even shows you like which data set and which report it was talking to. So we see we're exporting data from the sales report, and it was using the finance data set. So there are many, many activities that are in here. If you don't have access to this, because the Office 365 team is managing it, there's also an API that allows you to get to this. The Power BI admin can get this data through an API too. So then you'll be able to manage it directly. All right. The other thing that I quickly wanted to show you here is this one. So if you want that scenario that I talked about before, you just want to manage custom visuals that you have supported, then you can go in here and actually go ahead and say, okay, I want to add from file, and that allows you to build your any custom visual, and that will be available for every user in your organization. All right. So these are some of the things that are available inside the Power BI admin portal and into Office 365. So there are many, many different features available. So let's go ahead and go back to our presentation. And in that presentation, we're going to now talk about data security. So how is data inside of Power BI actually stored? So there are several types of data in Power BI. We have data, of course, you have data sitting inside of Power BI in a Power BI report and dashboard. You have the cloud and you have on-premise. First of all, you log into Azure Active Directory. We already seen that before. Potentially and probably your Azure Active Directory is synced to an on-premise AD. Potentially you have data sets sitting there. So you have a SQL or an Oracle or a Spark environment, and you have a SQL Server and Analysis Service environment. That uses a live connection or a scheduled refresh to get data into the cloud. So how are you accessing the data? So there's three main modes of connecting to data. One is you import data. So data is moved to Power BI and is leveraging its in-memory engine. It uses saved credentials to refresh. So again, data is moved to Power BI from its data source, and it's using credentials to get to that data. When you have used live connection or direct query, the data stays in its original location. The uses saved credentials or passes the username to the data source directly. So again, when you have single sign-on, for example, it passes the credentials to the data source, it sends the query using those credentials. If you have security set up on the data source, only the data that he's allowed to see will be moved back. And finally, we have push data. So data is pushed to Power BI and is leveraging its in-memory engine. The pushing data part is going through APIs and it's actually not used that much. All right. So how does Power BI handle that data? The way that it's handled is that the data is either in process or at rest. And the data in transit, so in process means it is flowing around through different servers. Or it's stored at rest and it needs to be loaded. So it means like a Power BI desktop file is stored on a file system somewhere so that it can be loaded. Okay? So data in transit between Power BI and the data source is always encrypted through HTTPS. And depending on the data source, data may be stored in the service or it's retrieved just in time, but it's always encrypted. So what types of data at rest are there? Well, first of all, the data itself in the data set is there. So that means the data that we loaded into the Power BI, into the data set, is being stored in there. Then we have credentials to connect to the data sources. We have the metadata of the report and dashboard layout. We have a visual cache that can be used to cache dashboards This can be tuned. And there's a dataset cache that is used to cache dataset queries from reports. Again, those can be tuned by the author. So these are the objects or the types of data at rest that there are. And again, at rest means data that is being stored in the Power BI service. Okay? So how does data get stored inside the Power BI? And again, this is a picture that we've taken from the Power BI security white paper. One thing that I want to mention too is make sure that when you go talk to your security team or to talk to someone about Power BI security, you always get the latest Power BI security white paper, because things change rapidly. And yeah, things always are up to date. And like, for example, I did this session before a couple of years at SQL Bits, but in the meantime, many things have changed. So I made a lot of changes to this presentation. So again, data is being stored, and when a user comes in, it goes through the API management, the gateway role, presentation role, and data roles. And in the end, data is stored in two different places: in an Azure Blob Storage or in an Azure SQL database. In Azure Blob Storage contains user uploaded data, so Power BI desktop file, for example, or the actual model is stored in Azure Blob Storage. In Azure SQL DB, that's generally where we store the metadata and some data too, like in the push dataset scenarios. Azure SQL DB has TDE enabled, so already it's encrypted directly there through the SQL Azure environment. And the data in Azure Blob Storage is encrypted too. Now, how is the data encrypted? The encryption keys to the Azure Blob Storage are stored, encrypted in a separate location in the Power BI service, and this is fully managed by an internal Microsoft service. So what does that mean? It means that no developer actually has access to the encryption keys. It's automatically being changed, it's automatically being updated. So again, no developer has access to it. The encryption keys for the Azure SQL database is managed by Azure SQL, so Power BI doesn't even use it. The encryption keys for credentials, and there are two different scenarios here too. In on-premise data sources, it's stored on the gateway. So when you connect to an on-premise environment, we don't even store the credentials in the cloud. It's stored on the machine that has the gateway. For cloud-based data sources, let's say you connect to an Azure SQL database or something in AWS or things like this, then it is stored in Azure SQL encryption. And again, so it's stored in Azure SQL and it's using the SQL encryption. But this is when you're using the out-of-the-box Power BI. So again, the tenant is created, there's encryption keys that are rotated and dealt with through an automated system at Microsoft, so no one has access to the data. But let's say you have an organization and you don't even want Microsoft to have access to the data. That way, what you can do is you can encrypt your Power BI datasets at rest using your own keys in an Azure Key Vault backed by an HSM. So this means you can assign separate keys to separate premium capacities. And you can revoke all access to the encrypted data in a single location, Azure Key Vault. Cache get purged within 60 minutes of key revocation. So this means your data will be encrypted with your key. No one has access to it. And your keys are being stored in Azure Key Vault. The main thing here to remember is two things. You manage your own keys. This means you're also only responsible for your own keys. If you lose the keys, you're in trouble, right? But again, in the subpoena cases or things like this, and you want to revoke access to it, you can just do it with a blink of an eye and all data will be gone. No longer accessible inside of Power BI. So this is bring your own key. This only works for your Power BI premium capacities. It's not possible in the Power BI shared capacity in the shared world. Now, the other important thing here is data sovereignty. Where is data actually being stored? You can see where your data is being stored. It is being stored in the location where you've created your Power BI tenant when we set it up. probably a long time ago. Someone tried out Power BI for the very first time and they set it up. Then you can see where your data is being stored. And that data is being stored in the same region. And this is important again for data sovereignty. Like for example, a lot of customers in Europe want the data to be stored in Europe. And so there's an option for almost any region in the world to store your data. So you have data stored in Europe. So that means there's a primary and a backup data center. They're both stored in Europe. The primary data center is in Ireland and the backup data center is in the Netherlands. In case something goes wrong, the backup data center takes over, right? You have Australia, you have UK, we have some sovereign clouds too in Germany and in the US. So if you want to know more about this, then you can click on the data sovereignty links. There's a trust center at Microsoft too that allows you to see and where all the data is and how it's being trusted and how it's being stored. Now, let's say, like for example, in the case of Microsoft, we have a huge global company and everyone works everywhere, but you still want to make sure that you have some data that is being stored at a particular region. Like for example, my subsidiary in Germany wants to keep their data about German customers in Germany. For that, we have an option of multi-geo for data sovereignty. So like this is the case for Microsoft, for example, right? We have our Power BI Premium or my Power BI home tenant is stored in the US. But I want to set up additional geographies. I want to set up additional capacities in different geographies. So you can do it in the same data center that we already have. So my home tenant is in the US, but I can set up a premium capacity in the Netherlands. I can set up a premium capacity in Germany. I can set up a premium capacity in Asia. And that has two benefits. One, for data sovereignty reasons, data stored on that will never be stored in the US or in the home region. It will only be stored in the tenant or in the data center that you've selected. And second, it has performance benefits too. Because when people visit from a data center or a location in Europe, they don't have to round trip to data in the US. They just stay local. All right, so that is all about protecting data and how we secure your data and how we store the data, how it's encrypted. This is usually the discussion that needs to be had with IT organizations when you move from that self-service BI environment to IT and corporate global environment too. So the next step is, okay, so now that IT department has approved this, and again, security white paper is your best friend when you want to have these discussions. All right, so now let's talk about protecting data. Because protecting data is not a step, right? So you've uploaded the data to Power BI, now you want to protect it. And the reason why we want to protect it is because data is exploding, right? It is created, stored, and shared everywhere. We have all these different platforms. There's emails, there's records, there's structured, there's SaaS environments, text messages, private clouds. It's everywhere, and we want to gain insights out of all of that data. So information protection and governance means like protecting government data wherever it lives. By understanding the data landscape and identifying important data across your hybrid environment, you can protect it too. So these flexible protection actions like encryption, access restrictions, and visual markings, so like knowing that it's an important item, automatically retain, delete, and store important data in a compliant manner. All of this is powered by an intelligent platform. So it's a unified approach to automatic data classification, policy management, analytics, and APIs. And again, the cool thing here is it is shared across all your Microsoft estates. So it uses a native solution to discover, classify, protect, and monitor sensitive data everywhere. In Office 365, in Office apps, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, even some cloud services like third-party SaaS applications, on-premises, file server, SharePoints, the Windows OS, and finally business applications like Power BI, Dynamics, Power Apps, all glued together on the Microsoft information protection policies. And there's a unified admin experience too. The first thing that you can do, and I'll show you this in a second, is you can classify and label Power BI artifacts with this sensitivity label. So data owners apply the Microsoft information protection sensitivity labels to datasets. These are the same sensitivity labels that can be used to classify and label Office 365 files, like Excel, PowerPoint, and Word, and emails and Exchange. So again, classified here, you can immediately see it, and I'll show you this in a demo in a bit. Those labels follow true, and again, I'll show you this too. But let's say you're in Power BI and you have a high confidential dashboard or report, you download it to Excel, and it has a high confidential tag that is being taken to it. So now, if we have a policy, for example, that says, okay, high confidential can never leave the company, I will not be able to use it to email to someone outside of the organization because you have this policies applied. And we are able to see in the application, and again, I'll show you this a bit later on, we're able to see inside of that application that someone downloaded highly confidential data to Excel. And then you can take actions if you don't trust it. So labels, again, files exported from Power BI are protected, and I'll show you this again in a second too. But it means that if you don't have a Microsoft credential, you won't be able to see it. So we have the unified app administration. So the Microsoft Cloud App Security is the place where this all comes together. It's centralized monitoring and control for these applications. Endpoint detection, responsing, data loss protection, which is of course very important for data and BI. I think honestly, this is one of the most killer features together with the AAD Active Directory on security in Power BI that actually most people never talk about, but it's very important. You can discover and control shadow IT, identify and remediate cloud native attacks, and protecting that information in real time with powerful controls. Yeah. So again, for example, what you can do here is you can leverage these labels to protect sensitive data for exfiltration. So, for example, I can say, okay, I do not want anyone to block any downloads for high confidential data to an unmanaged device. So again, maybe they log into the browser from somewhere else. They were able to go through two-factor authentication, and now they want to start downloading some Excel spreadsheets, some data into Excel spreadsheets from that unmanaged device. You can just set the policy, it's not allowed, and then we will block it. And monitor it too. We immediately get a notification that someone is trying to do something, and maybe the password leaked or things like this, and then you can take action. And again, monitoring, things like, this is very cool. It does the things like, okay, multiple sharing of reports. So that someone has been sharing the same report to many different people. Suspicious reporting. So again, multiple IP addresses opened it up. Impossible travel activities. So someone logged in with credentials that are in the Netherlands and someone logged in with credentials that are in the US at the same day, or maybe in the same couple of hours. Not possible. Uncommon locations. So Casper is always logging into Power BI in either the Netherlands or in Redmond. Now he's logging in a lot of times in France. What's going on? And again, all of these policies are part of Cloud App Security. Then there's some admin oversight too of the sensitive data. So Power BI admins will have full visibility to sensitive data labeling in their environment, either directly inside of Power BI or they get it in the Cloud App Security portal. But both are possible. Okay, so without much talk, let's actually go into a demo. So here I have an environment and I have a sales dashboard. What I can go in here and go in here and go into my settings. And immediately what I can do here is a few things. I can endorse them. So you can actually start endorsing and promoting and certifying reports. In my case, I'm not going to go talk about that. What I really want to talk about is my sensitivity label. So here I've set it to highly confidential internal only. And this means it's now highly confidential. And I immediately see it here. But if I open the report too, I will see it at the top. So again, it's highly confidential internal only. And we can see the report here. What I can do is I can go in and export some data. It's summarized data. It's going to open up, download an Excel spreadsheet. The interesting thing here is I'm actually not logged in with my Microsoft credentials. I'm logged in here to a demo tenant. And the demo tenant, it's some tenant. And I open this up. It's going to open up Excel. And immediately it's going to say, because again, it's highly confidential, remember? It's going to configure my computer for information right protections. And it wants me to log in. Because I was logged into this different account, I don't have the password. And immediately what it will say is, well, okay, you're not signed into an office with an account that has permission to view to open this workbook. So again, because we have this sensitivity labels as highly confidential and we have this policy set, you won't be able to actually open this with any account outside of Microsoft. So again, protection built in immediately. So the important thing here is, okay, how can we prevent this data leaking? Because this is top of mind, is data leakage protection and making sure that we can gather all of that information. The other things that I can go ahead and do here is I can go ahead and go back in here. And in order for me to understand how I'm trusting my data, actually I can just go directly from here. I can see lineage view. So I can go ahead and see the lineage. Where does the data come from? So in my case, I could see, well, my report actually has a dashboard going with it too. And it's a dashboard and it has connected to the finance department model. And actually it's a shared data set and it's coming from the finance department workspace. So if I click on here, it actually allows me to drill through. Okay, so my finance model is connected to two data flows. That is connected to common data services, data service for apps. That's where the sales data comes from. And my customer support data, it looks like it is coming from Azure Blob Storage. So all the way down, I can figure out where this data come from. And again, it allows me to bring trust to the model. And actually, the other thing you can see here is, okay, also the finance model comes from this other model that I have here. And that again goes into other models, and all the way down, we can see it's a combination of like 3 different items: product sales, CA sales, or customer support, and they all blend in together. So again, I can figure out what is going on and where it's coming from. Okay? Yeah. So the other thing that I can go ahead and do is I can actually now go figure out what is going on my security model too. So when I go in here, let me quickly refresh the screen. My data protections, it actually shows me a report with all the information data, data sensitivity labels and things like that are available. So it shows me, okay, how many labels are there? Who is using what? How many dashboards are there? How many reports are there? Data flows and data sets. With all these different, I can actually go in and say, okay, I just want to see dashboards, just want to see reports. So there's lots of confidential information. We can change the time frame too. And we can figure out on a high level what's going on. But if we really want to go in and figure out on a lower level what is going on, we need to go to that cloud app security that I was talking about. So you can click on here. I actually opened it already before. And this will bring me to my cloud app security portal. This is usually the portal where we can go and figure out what is going on. So for example, I can immediately see, well, there's 2 users that I need to investigate. Arun, of course, our big boss, we need to investigate, and Adele. And they have some really bad things going on. So we need to take a look what's going on with these users. So what are some of the alerts that are open? Now, for example, what I can see is, okay, well, we have some activity from infrequent countries. We can block download the files with high confidential too. And in one glance of an eye, we can see where the locations are that people have looked at Power BI. So you have looked at from Israel, from Singapore, United States, the Netherlands, Ireland. So what else? Let's go ahead and discover or investigate. So let's investigate some of these items. It's asking me to log in again. So let's take a look at the activity log. So immediately I can see, okay, so we have logged in many times today. We've done some things. We've exported the report of the Power BI report, sales report. We just saw it. We've tried to look at some of the data. So we viewed the report. We tried to export it again. We did it before too. We viewed some reports, and we can actually go ahead and to do next. And we can figure out exactly what's going on. So we tried to log in. We've changed the password. We've logged in. In general, I failed login for a particular user too. Device need to be updated. We've blocked a download. So Adele has tried to log in to a location that is not appropriate. So we've gone in and blocked the download of the file too. So it's an alert that it's triggered. This one is coming from the US. So we can actually go in and figure out what's going on here. And again, alerts too. So activity from an infrequent country. So again, it's me in the Netherlands logging in to this account. We've blocked the file with highly confidential labels to an unmanaged device. That was done through Adele, who's logging in from the US. Again, infrequent country, someone's logging in from Israel, and so on. So activities here. So the important thing to recognize and remember here is that what we can have and what we can do here is we can make sure that we prevent data from getting out. And this is probably one of the biggest things that is going on, and you can go and use to sell it to your IT department. Okay, how can I use Power BI? And I'm allowed to use Power BI. And finally, the thing that I want to talk about is compliance and market availability. So again, compliance is usually a discussion that needs to start to happen after you've gone through the self-service phase, when people just started uploading Power BI just to be able to get a solution. When you actually start to talk to, again, IT and other departments, are we compliant? And are we available in the right country? So the compliance for Power BI, and again, all of these things and labels and securities that you see on the bottom. So we have HIPAA compliance, EU model clause, gov.uk, FedRAMP, ESI, ISO certificates. All of these are very important. And again, so if you search for Power BI Trust Center, you get to a website that actually goes ahead and shows you all of the current compliances, because again, things are changing rapidly here. New compliances come all the time. New data centers come all the time. You see us sitting there all around. And actually, I think this is already outdated a little bit, this slide. I think we're now in 50 data centers worldwide. But again, you go to the Trust Center, you can see it. But you can see we're in the US, we're in South America, in Africa, in Asia, and of course in Europe too, and Australia. So either your primary tenant can be there, or you can have a multi-geo environment where you set up your Power BI across the globe for all your users. And again, we have all the certificates at the bottom. So let's quickly talk about how you can secure your data. And we won't go into too much details here, as already lots of people talking about these things. But the main thing here is we want to make sure that you understand that data in your workspace is yours alone. You can share dashboards with other users to see. You can create an app workspace to collaborate with others. So you can share dashboards with others to see. So others, now it goes out of your control, it goes to others that you've shared it with. You can create an app workspace so you can actually collaborate with others. So not just seeing, but actually collaboration. You can distribute an app for consumption to use inside and outside of your organization using app source or direct URL. And then finally, once you've given access to data in your environment for just seeing, if you make someone collaborator on an app workspace, he'll be able to see all the data. If you just give you viewer access roles, you can secure the data with row level security. So that even means that the same report and the same dashboard that you've shared with people around the world, for example, the sales department in the Netherlands can only see sales data from the Netherlands, and the sales department from the UK can only see data from the UK. So, finally, and I've talked about many of these things before, a lot of things that are important here is, first of all, that Power BI security white paper that I talked about. If you're going to have that discussion, if you're interested in this, if you need to know more about Power BI security, go to the Power BI security white paper. Then, if you need to talk about data centers and you need to talk about things like this, go to the Power BI Trust Center. Then, you need to go secure your data. You need to row level security. There's a cheat sheet available. And there's lots of, maybe most of the ones here on the bottom are talking about securing the data with row level security. And finally, Power BI app distribution is also very important. So if you want to distribute apps to a larger organization, how do you distribute it? And with that, I have come to the end of my presentation.